And how offensive is it to women to say we have to lower the standards in order for more women to get in? It's ridiculous. I think a much better approach is understanding a woman's influence and her unique gifts and then applying those to the FBI or the government or whatever it might be, rather than changing the expectations that are set for, military readiness or something like that.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Gen Z Unplugged. Today we have an exciting episode where we will be talking about the story of Nicole Parker. She was a former FBI special agent and she actually just spoke for us at our center for our Conservative Network event. She worked on so many nationally significant cases, including the Parkland school shooting, the Fort Lauderdale airport shooting, and the Cesar Sayoc pipe bomb investigation. She earned 3 Law Enforcement Officer of the Year awards from the U.S. Attorney's Office, as well as the FBI Medal of Excellence, and she perfect scored her oral exam to get into the FBI. So honestly, very impressive woman, and we are going to be talking about her story and just the message of courage that resonated within her story to our whole audience, and just that as the overall theme.
Yeah, I think that was really the thing that stood out the most about Nicole Parker's remarks here at the center, and we will link these in the description. So please go watch her talk. And she wrote a book that recently came out called The Two FBIs, The Bravery and Betrayal I Saw at My Time at the Bureau. And it's all about her experience in the FBI and essentially this internal divide where she was working in what she calls FBI 1, where it was, upstanding citizens who wanted to serve their country and protect Americans. And then there's FBI 2, which she describes as, the DC headquarters and even down to field offices throughout the country that were actively working against America, against our interests, and going after people and not going after people in this, what she describes as a 2-tiered justice system. So we highly recommend checking out her talk. It is phenomenal, and reading her book. She goes into way more depth of what we're going to talk about here, but something that she brought up in her talk that I think is really important for us kind of in our age and kind of in the aftermath of DEI to realize is she talks about how she was a woman in the FBI, which is amazing. There's not that many women in the FBI, but she's really passionate about the fact that she was qualified. That she wasn't there to just be the token female, but she was there. She, like you said, she got a perfect score on her oral exam. She trained in marksmanship. She, got past all the Quantico trainings, and standards weren't lowered for her. And she was in the FBI during, I think, is it 2011 to 2022?
Mm-hmm.
So that's through several administrations. And her breaking point was really during the Biden administration.
Yeah, and she talked in her remarks about how she even got into this as a career, because she was very successful in the business world too beforehand, but she was working in Manhattan and she witnessed actually firsthand the events of 9/11. She goes into more detail about that in her talk too, but she said after that she really got this passion for helping people and for serving the public interest, which she found a lot in FBI 1, but not in FBI 2. So when she made that decision to step away, it was so that she'd be able to speak her truth and to get her message out there, because that wasn't possible for her while she was actively serving to speak that truth.
Yeah, and she said that they often use the pension, promised to all government employees, that to silence people.
Mm-hmm.
That they would kind of dangle that in front of your face and say, well, if you speak up, you're going to lose your pension. And she valued her integrity and justice higher than money, which I think is a very underrated quality, because so many people are tied to that and don't trust that everything's going to be okay if they walk away. So she did. She walked away. And now she is a Fox News contributor and she speaks out about these things all the time. And she's just extremely courageous and a person of really high integrity, which is something that we're really passionate about here too.
And she talked about how courage was in her stepping away too, which I think is something that doesn't really hit Gen Z a lot. A lot of the stepping away is seen as giving up, but she didn't just step away. She stepped away and used that as a launch pad to Fox News and telling the truth and all of that, because she said that towards the end of her time at the FBI, it felt like a quote twilight zone, because you didn't know who believed what, who was an FBI 1, who was an FBI 2, as she called it. And so I think that message really, really resonated with our audience. And for young people in the audience, we had a few Gen Z people in there. And just, that courage of that stepping away wasn't a failure. It was actually a courageous act that she used for good.
Yeah. Something that she talked about that I think we want to talk about too is how, I said earlier, she refused to be the token female. And during that Cesar Sayoc pipe bomb investigation, a Miami newspaper had taken her photo, which is the cover of her book, and kind of written an article about how the FBI is trying to have more of a diverse population of employees. And so by making her picture the center of that, she's this token female. And she says that made her livid and made her really angry because she got a perfect score on her oral exam. And she didn't have to bend the qualifications to meet them. So we just want to recognize that and recognize how, over the past few years, DEI has actually lowered the standards for people. And Nicole talks about this, how that led to a mistrust inside of the FBI because you didn't know if someone was going to be qualified enough to have your back in deadly situations, life or death situations. So those stakes are extremely high. So she's really passionate about not lowering those standards and qualifications. And I know that, during the Biden administration, we were at an all-time low of military readiness. I mean, Americans had just a total distrust in our military because we believed that people were being let in on for reasons that would not qualify them to be in the military or be in the FBI. So she talks about her specific strengths as a woman too. And I want to play this clip from her talk that I think you'll appreciate.
And again, FBI too wasn't just politics. It was also the social justice warrior movement. I would say it was political and social justice movements that completely wrecked us. And I am a woman and I love being a woman. I know exactly who I am. I know exactly what I stand for, but I should not be a special agent because I am a woman. If I am not qualified, I should not be there. And that's the bottom line. And so I kind of got irritated because I felt like the FBI, the Cesar Sayoc case, it was highly publicized. Look at my book cover. This is from an actual case. This is from the media. We don't take pictures in the FBI, but when they take pictures of us in our normal course of duty, they are allowed to do that. I did not give the, Miami Herald or Sun Sentinel and all the publications that use my photo, that it is what it is. There were tons of photos taken from this case. So this is actually a real photo. This is not staged. This is a real deal. I was being bombarded by media. Well, this was in October of 2018. I think it was February of the following year, the Wall Street Journal, and I talk about this in my book, they did a piece about recruiting efforts at the FBI and that they wanted to recruit the non-typical FBI agent. And they used my picture from one of the Cesar Sayoc photos. And I was almost like the poster child for women. And I looked like I was a token female. And I was angry. Like someone said, oh my gosh, I think that's your picture for this huge New York Times article. I read the article. Most people be like, and again, I used to work on Wall Street before the FBI. I was never in the Wall Street Journal when I was working for, Merrill Lynch, but now I'm at the FBI and I'm in the Wall Street Journal. So that was a time when, again, I'm proud to be a woman. I love being a female. Like I bring a lot to the table for the agency because of it, but I'm not a token female and no one should be. And that's why I want to speak directly to y'all. Embrace your femininity because you have a gift. You definitely have a gift. But you've got to be qualified. And so I remember walking in and I told our press guy in Miami, I'm like, who gave them the permission to do this? And they're like, I was livid. I was like, I want my picture off of this. And so they're like, look, they were a little shocked. And I said, look, it makes it look like I'm the token female. Little do they know that the chart that they referenced, there was a graph in the thing and it said the highest number of applicants was the year that I applied. Little did they know that I got a perfect score on my phase 2 test The guy that did my assessment, it's a panel of 3 agents. It's an hour long. They ask you questions for 1 hour, 13 questions. You have to answer them. It's recorded. And that's the oral portion of the phase 2 exam. One of my phase 2 assessors told me after the fact, he said, look, I've been doing this for over 20 years. I can count on one hand how many people have gotten a perfect score. And you are one of them.
Not a token female.
Mm-hmm. And what a good example for young women and our listeners, you guys. What a good example for standing up for yourself as a woman, knowing that you're qualified, doing the really, really hard work to be qualified and having that pay off.
Yeah. And like she says, that being a woman doesn't mean that she should automatically be deemed qualified for qualifications that she doesn't have, but it also means that she has unique gifts and strengths because of that. And I think she talks about that a little bit more here. So let me play some more of this clip.
And again, don't mistake that for someone who doesn't value. Like I said, I value being a woman. I think it's amazing. I think it's wonderful. I cherished and loved being the only female on my violent crime squad. I knew that there were things that I had the ability to do. Like, look, do you think someone's going to give intel to some old dude or some younger female? Like, a lot of times I would get information and confessions from people that no one else was going to be able to get. So use your gifts and use your strengths. But I also recognize I'm not going to be at the front of the stack. I don't need to be at the front of the stack. I am not the largest. I am not the strongest. I'm biologically made different, and I embrace that. Like, no, I am not as strong and fast as a man. And anyone that thinks that they are is lying to you.
Very wise. And this comes back to something we talk about a lot, is that men and women are completely equal, but we're not the exact same. And that's a good thing.
Yeah. And she's so grounded in that. Like, she's so candid about her strengths. And she says very humbly, she says everything that she's accomplished. And then she goes on to say, like we just heard, that she brought something else to the table, something more to the table that the guys didn't.
Yeah.
And that we don't need to be hired as token females when we bring unique gifts to the table. And yeah, I think that just needs to be recognized.
Yeah. Yeah. And how offensive is it to women to say we have to lower the standards in order for more women to get in? It's ridiculous. I think a much better approach is understanding a woman's influence and her unique gifts, and then applying those to the FBI or the government or whatever it might be, rather than changing the expectations that are set for, military readiness or something like that. But there's plenty of women who do meet those standards, which is pretty amazing. Because the average amount of push-ups for women is 0.
And pull-ups.
Or pull-ups, yeah. Pull-ups,
Yeah,
not push-ups. Yeah, push-ups you can do, but pull-ups, yeah. Like the average pull-up for women is 0. So we're just built different. And there's plenty of women who can do like 10 pull-ups, which is, I can't even fathom that. So, we're different. We're not the same.
Mm-hmm. And just recognizing that there are different types of excellence, and different types of excellence can be among a whole different, all different careers, basically. I know there's a lot of women journalists out there. A lot of them speak for us. Mary Margaret just got her permanent seat at the White House with the Daily Wire in the press room, which is pretty amazing. And there's so many, mothers who are showing their excellence in their work too. So just realizing that women's excellence can be among a whole broader sphere, I guess.
Right. Yeah. And I think it's pretty crazy to say, well, women shouldn't be law enforcement officers because that's a job for men. Which makes no sense to me, because that is not a recognition that women have specific strengths and unique abilities. A lot of times, yes, we can achieve the same things. Like Nicole Parker was meeting the standards that all of these men in the FBI were meeting, but she was also bringing something else. And same goes for men's unique ability. Like, they're going to bring something special and unique to a job too. Like, we don't want to negate that as well. So I think that there's just so many lessons of hard work and grit, because she talks about how important it is to work hard and how she viewed this job not as work but as a calling, and like she was truly on a mission. And that's what she describes as FBI 1, and that's what we as a country have to come back to.
And she told us at the end, and especially towards the young people there, she said, at the end of the day, all you have is your integrity and hard work. When people know that they can trust you and that what you say, you live up to it, no one can dispute that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's so true, especially for young people who are maybe just starting their careers or starting their interviews. Just that honesty and that virtue, that courage, that the quote that we always like to mention from Claire Booth Lewis is, the courage is the ladder upon which all other virtues mount. And Nicole's a great example of that. And yeah, everything she had to say reflected that.
Yeah, and on the note of integrity, something that Nicole mentioned is how FBI too, you know, people who were acting out of political gain or were making FBI decisions based on political affiliation and handing out a two-tiered system of justice based on who you voted for. Nicole was like, I don't care who you voted for. We're here to do something. We're here to protect Americans and neutralize threats. It doesn't matter what your political affiliation is. But FBI too was this presence that insisted on weaponizing their power against political enemies, basically. And something she talks about is how a lot of the agents around her would say, well, I'm just doing what they told me to do. And she was like, no, you don't have to do exactly what they told you to do. She even says that's why they took us to the Holocaust Museum during training, is because this is what happens when you're just doing what you're told to do. And, you know, it made me think of, like, I did psychology in college, and we talked about over and over is the Milgram shock experiment. I don't know if you're familiar with this. Yeah. So for those who don't know, it was an experiment, I think probably in the 40s or 50s, but they had participants come in, and there was a doctor in a white coat, and then someone in another room who they couldn't see, who was being given a shock. And the doctor said, okay, well, administer these questions to this patient, and every time they get a question wrong, you're going to shock them. And so it started out small with these kind of little shocks, and, you know, they wouldn't really hear reaction from the patient. But then it started to get more and more, and the doctor would say, okay, increase the shock now. And what they found is that, I should bring up the statistic about how many it is, but so many people who were participating in the study would just turn it up until the person in the other room was screaming so much that you could hear the pain. And it was all, you know, fake. They weren't actually being hurt. But that goes to show that if someone in authority tells you what to do, you just do it. And something they brought up in this experiment too is it wasn't a real doctor. So they didn't even like ask for qualifications or authority. That we're just, you know, our minds just say, oh, okay, well, this person in authority is telling me to do it. And it makes me think of COVID. I mean, when you have the highest levels of government telling you to do something, you just assume they know best. But we have to look back at history and be reminded that those who claim to know best are so often wrong, and it's catastrophic.
Mm-hmm. And that's why the blind obedience that we talk a lot about, and that sort of mindset is so destructive to just America and America's ideals and all the ideals that we were founded upon. All of our founding fathers were not followers.
Yeah.
They were fighters against what they were being told by Britain, the big power, you know. Yeah, so they thought for themselves. They kept their individualism and their own thoughts. And that's what's being taken away in schools, especially in schools, and in other areas of government, obviously, as we can see here. That blind obedience is uniquely destructive to our country and our nation.
Yeah, it really is. And I think we have to understand that it's so unbelievably important. And it happens every day, honestly. Like those little ways that you can violate your conscience or your gut. I think like that's why scripture tells us, like, do not violate your conscience, because that is what God gives us to know when something is right and when something is wrong. And I think we as women especially have this just gut feeling and these instincts that God has given to us. And that is so strong and powerful. And that if you train yourself to push those instincts down and ignore those gut feelings, that's when it leads to real destruction, where you're just following someone who's causing you to sacrifice on that.
Yeah, and we've talked about multiple studies, especially in the beginning of the podcast. You brought up a lot of these stats, but how young women specifically in the college sphere have those natural instincts, and they know that. But then when they're questioned about it, they just they say what they're told to say. They lean into the leftist ideas, and they express that that's how they feel, even though they don't, because they're afraid of criticism, for good reason, because they do get criticized. I mean, Isabel Brown talks about her experience as a college student and how much backlash she got. But then she talks about this young man who came to her later and was like, listen, because you were different on the college campus, that's why I believe what I believe now. And I've kind of left all the radical stuff. And Isabel had an opportunity to see that the seed that she planted years later, the seed that she planted in that young man's heart came to fruition. She saw that. But a lot of the girls in college that are kind of just caving, they don't ever get to experience that because they don't even plant the seed to begin with, because they're just they're following examples and the ideology that's popular right now. But so many, like you said, do have that natural instinct, those conservative instincts of family and true femininity, not radical feminism. But they're just scared to say it.
Yeah. It's all comes back to groupthink. I think when you assume that everybody believes something, you're just going to say that you believe it too. And that is it's devastating on, a huge level when you think about things like the Holocaust and how everybody kind of assumed everyone was on the same page. And then even on like the day to day when you're, at work or in school, like you get together in these groups and the loudest person says something, and if no one else says anything, and then, you'll get together with your friends after and you'll all be like, that was crazy. None of you said anything. And like the decision had been made. I think that one of like the Bay of Pigs in the Kennedy administration was an example of groupthink that they shared with us in psychology. Like everybody said later that they really disagreed with the strategy, but nobody said anything. And so that's why something we talk about here too is how important it is to speak up and identify issues and give feedback, even if it means like awkwardness or, if it's a little bit scary. It's okay. And that's why it's really important to foster an environment where feedback is welcome and criticism and critiques are welcome, because it actually helps you see blind spots. And that's another thing is like, I'm so glad that we're blessed with differences. And so often I'll like, get in my head about something and I'll tell like my husband, it might be insane. And he tells me if I'm being insane, and it's great. And he's not afraid that I'm going to get mad about that sort of thing. So being open to that, I think is really important for us.
And like you said, it can cost something. It cost Nicole her pension, her financial stability that they threatened her with, and threatened a lot of other agents with. She said that we'll take away your pension and don't leave, or things like you're the kind of agent we really need, and that kind of thing, which is true. We do need an agent like that, but nothing was going to change, she said. And she talked to her dad about it too. Yeah. That's another thing that's important, to go to people who really love you and know your abilities, and just know everything about you, basically. People who really know and love you. She went to her dad and was like, Dad, what should I do? Because this is what's going on in the FBI. And I really can't do anything about it. I'm just like, I think she said, I'm a nobody in Miami. Like, I'm not going to change anything internally. And so ultimately her dad agreed with her and was like, yeah, for your good, you need to step away and just use that after you step away and just tell people the truth, which I thought was really inspiring, actually.
Yeah. Don't forget about your parents and the power of their influence and their mentorship over you too. So I really appreciate that she talked about her dad in that way.
And with that, we are going to wrap up this episode, and we want to leave you with just what Nicole said. Work hard, have integrity, use your gifts and your strengths, and we will see you on the next episode.